Welcome to Save Your Voice, a voice banking webinar. Really excited to have speech language pathologist Matthew Seifert present
Yep.
this important and interesting topic. I will introduce Matthew now, and then he will share information and educate us all about voice banking.
Okay. Thank you.
Matthew, oh, you're welcome. He's a licensed clinical speech language pathologist specializing in voice, swallowing, and upper airway disorders. He holds degrees in voice performance and speech language pathology from Indiana University of Pennsylvania, Kansas State University, West Virginia University, and Delaware Valley University. He has completed advanced training at several leading voice centers, and he is certified in a range of voice and swallowing therapies, including LSVT, fees, and modified barium swallow studies. He has presented research nationally and is a professional vocalist, pianist, and choral director. He also has over a decade of experience teaching collegiate voice. And Matthew recently accepted a position as a clinical speech language pathologist treating disorders of the voice, swallowing, and the upper airway at Michigan Otolaryngology Surgery Associates. Thank you, Matthew. Please take it
Yeah.
away.
Thank you so much. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
everyone for joining and for having me today. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here to start the
Sure.
presentation, see if I can do this right. Let's see. On this screen for the PowerPoint. I'm going to share sound because I do have a couple videos, just quick little ones throughout that I will show you. Optimize for video sharing. If there's any problems with the technology or anything, please let me know. Okay. So thank you, Casey, for the introduction. Like
You're
she said,
welcome.
I have a kind of a diverse background coming from the voice singing background that led me into the clinical voice pathology realm. This, let's see, am I blocking with you guys? Can you see yourselves there or you see the screen fine?
I can
Look
see
good?
your first slide.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So, like Casey said, I specialize in voice swallowing and upper airway. So, this presentation is about essentially a voice banking technology and what it can do to help the Parkinson's population. We call it Save Your Voice because essentially what we're trying to do is record or bank, save the versions of the voice, which we'll get into more in depth as I go, to allow for an alternative and augmentative uh, way of communicating for patients if the voice becomes aphonic or unable to be used. So, a little breakdown of what we're going to talk about today. I am planning to give a quick little background into Parkinson's disease and speech pathology. I assume if you're here, you probably have a good understanding of Parkinson's. I just want to make sure that I am covering what our scope of practice is and what we can do for that population. I'm also going to go over a little bit of the traditional speech and swallowing intervention before we get into the Save Your Voice initiative and that introduction to AAC and how voice banking can work. I also have a couple breakdowns from real patient experiences about voice banking. Most of them are Parkinson's, but you'll see that I think two of the ones I selected are also ALS, because you'll see that essentially the neurodegenerative disorders, this voice banking technology can be utilized by many different areas. Parkinson's is a newer area that is starting to adapt to this technology a little bit. So let me, next page. Let me start with a little bit about the relationship between speech language pathology clinicians and the Parkinson's disease patients. Parkinson's disease leads to a motor speech disorder, typically associated or known as hypokinetic dysarthria. A dysarthria is a motor speech disorder where the damage to the nervous system causes the muscles that produce speech to become paralyzed or weakened. There are multiple different classes of dysarthrias. Hypokinetic dysarthria specifically affects speech and vocal production due to the reduced range of motion, slowing of movements, and rigidity of movements caused by the Parkinson's. This will result then in the symptoms of reduced loudness, a monotone quality voice, imprecise articulation, abnormal speech rhythm or stress patterns, breathy vocal quality, and a rapid speech rate. Rapid speech rate typically because of the smaller movements or that lack of range of motion, then those articulated sounds come out quite faster, which reduces the intelligibility. What do SLPs do for the Parkinson's population? Well, our scope of practice is pretty wide. You'll see that we do the traditional language and articulation phonology type of work that many think of as more school-based or maybe outpatient, especially within the developmental population. But we also do language and articulation, especially with motor speech disorders, with all ages, all populations. We also do voice, AAC, swallowing, stuttering, cognition, social skills, and a little bit with hearing in collaboration with audiologists. You'll find that the three areas that are most involved with Parkinson's typically are the voice and speech, where what we do is we work to improve the volume and clarity of speech. We use exercises like the Lee Silverman voice treatment, the SLVT loud program. This allows for increased loudness and makes speech more understandable. Essentially, it addresses voice quality. We can, by addressing tremor reduction and by reducing the breathy voice, and we do this by strengthening the vocal cord muscles. The vocal cords themselves, vocal folds, whichever you want to call it, are essentially a muscle-based structure. So the thyroarytenoid muscle that is the body of the core of the vocal folds can become weakened. It can become atrophied pretty quickly. Studies have shown that within a week of no voice use, that muscle starts to atrophy and become weakened. So what we want to do is we want to do a little bit of strengthening what we can. I'll say with the Parkinson's population that we try to balance this because there's a certain level with neurodegenerative that we don't want to push past the capabilities, but we can always still try to maintain some strengthening. And there are other exercises we do as well. In addition to Lee Silverman voice treatment, we also have Speak Out, which is a similar program in structure. And then there are other things like vocal function exercises that were developed by Dr. Joe Stemple that actually target through various posturing positions of the vocal tract that allow those muscles to start to strengthen and engage. But again, I always remind that with the Parkinson's population, we want to tailor the treatment to that individual. And depending on where they are within progression of the voice deterioration, we want to make sure that we're not pushing past a point that is realistic. And then again, just managing the dysarthria in a general sense to help improve articulation and hopefully reduce any type of lack of intelligibility within their speech. And then the swallowing area, which is not a big thing that we're covering today, but with Parkinson's population, again, it is going to be something that we would address as an SLP. It's really important that we do swallowing assessments. So that would either be a modified barium swallow study or a FEES, which is flexible endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. These are both evaluation methods that I've been trained in and that I often do. The modified barium swallow study, not as much because I have most experience in outpatient settings where FEES is much more popular. FEES allows us to go in through the nasal cavity so that we can take a look at the swallowing mechanism as the swallow happens, and then we're able to evaluate it that way. Just like all the evaluation means that an SLP uses, we want to try to use this to target the individual difficulties or struggles of the patient and try to also identify things that are working well so that we can try to enhance those while adding aids to those that aren't working as well. We also provide oral motor and swallowing exercises as a result of that assessment then, and we pick different types of exercises that will target those areas that need strengthened, and a lot of times it's compensatory strategies as well. When we think about the swallowing mechanism, it's a lot about safety. We don't want to risk any aspiration or penetration into the lungs, so that's why we often will find compensation strategies to make sure that we're reducing that risk. Sometimes we'll do diet modifications. This is for most speech clinicians, this is a last resort. We don't want to, and with a population like Parkinson's, we're not trying to restrict or take away any foods, especially that give them pleasure or that they enjoy or that are keeping a good giving them a good amount of nutrients. But for safety of swallow, every once in a while, we might have to adjust consistency or restrict some foods if they're having specific problems with them. Again, within my practice, I always try to do this as a last resort, especially because taking away food from people and changing consistencies can really affect that nutritional intake. But again, swallow safety is important. And then a little bit of cognition and communication. This links a little bit more with what we're specifically talking about today, which is about finding alternative and augmentative communication options. This is typically done through things like speech generating devices or through low-tech means. It can be paper and pencil or flashcards. But the thing about the communication aspect of this is that we want to make sure that we're providing communication throughout for all patients and at all points within the disease so that they aren't without their communication skills. Okay. Just remember to always consult with speech language pathology. I know, especially with a diagnosis like Parkinson's, it's really easy to for the patient, or I can make the assumption that the patient could easily become overwhelmed by all the different physicians and clinicians that they need to see. But speech and voice are something that is good to consult with towards the beginning of the diagnosis. And I will get into why that is important a little bit now. So traditional speech and swallow intervention, the evidence-based speech and swallowing techniques that we use, traditionally, the primary two that we use, and the first one, the gold standard that many think of, is Lee Silverman voice treatment. This is the LOUD protocol. This is a treatment for the voice disorders associated with Parkinson's disease. It focuses on increasing that vocal loudness and is delivered by a speech therapist in 16 one-hour sessions that are spread over 4 weeks. So what you'll probably see from this is that the intensity of this program is fairly intense, but it's not long in terms of how long you see this therapist for. The program continues as an at-home exercise program and is meant to be fairly intensive, and is something that the patient should be doing on a daily basis at home, even after all of those 16 sessions are completed. I'm not going to get into great detail about these programs. One, I assume that people are probably familiar with them. Plus, we're going to focus on the AAC voice banking today. The Speak Out Therapy program is very similar. Essentially, this one was created as modeled after that same SLVT model, but it was developed by the Parkinson's Voice Project and helps people with Parkinson's and related disorders get a little bit more strength in their voice and to retain the voice that they have. This also involves improving volume, articulation, clarity, breath support for speech, vocal quality, intonation, and facial expressions. Dysphagia therapy, typical swallow therapy for Parkinson's, like I said, is about providing compensatory strategies using things like effortful swallows, dietary modifications, bolus-driven therapy, and sometimes we do EMST, expiratory muscle strength training. This all leads back to the safety of the swallow and the fact that we don't want to risk things aspirating or penetrating. If that does happen, though, it's important that the patient has strong enough expiratory muscle strength so they can expel anything that does potentially go into their lungs, so any particulates that would cause any type of infection or anything within the lungs. The specific therapy, though, for dysphagia therapy is far more tailored to the individual than the protocol for the voice therapy programs, because those are very intensive, and the protocol that has been researched, or at least the research into the protocol, I should say, indicates that the best results come from following it very strictly and following the intense 16 times a week, 1 hour session spread over 4 weeks. Okay, and then Save Your Voice Initiative. I wanted to get through that other background stuff, but I felt like it wouldn't be right if I didn't at least mention the background of what the SLPs do. But what are communication options after those traditional intervention methods that I mentioned? So within the Parkinson's community, both clinical and patient perspective, it is quickly becoming more commonplace to explore these non-traditional intervention techniques, especially technology-based interventions. Specifically, the utilization of alternative and augmentative communication technology within the Parkinson's population has been increasing significantly over recent years. This evolution has expanded the options for patients, for individuals with Parkinson's disease. What I'm talking about is alternative and augmentative and alternative communication. So these options are essentially what the name says, an augmentation on their current communication. So sometimes it's just adding an extra aid or something that is going to enhance their ability to communicate. Sometimes it's entirely an alternative communication aid, which what we're talking about with voice banking really falls under alternative communication, because the voice banking is meant to then be used with an AAC device. And we'll talk about that next. So AAC, what does that mean? Augmentative and alternative communication is a term that covers a wide range of techniques and communication aids that support or replace spoken or written communication. AAC is commonly used to refer to the electronic communication aids and products. These we call high tech. So if you think of anyone that uses an iPad with a system on it where they select a symbol and it speaks for them and has a voice generating aspect of it, that's what most people think of at this point for high tech and for most AAC. But it still includes any of the low tech options, which could just be paper and pen, drawing a picture, writing words, providing gestures, or actual signing if you speak ASL, using symbols, communication charts, letters, words, picture boards, or books. I do have a couple examples here to the left. You'll see an example of a picture board. You'll see an example of a flip chart. These ones are developed specifically for the individual. The big thing about AAC is that we don't want it to be textbook. We don't want it to be something that is meant to be handed out the same to everyone. It's tailored to the individual. And with voice banking, it adds another layer of that individuality that you don't get from a picture book, or even, for example, these single phrase buttons that are used. The thing that's going to be used with the voice banking that we're going to get into next are traditionally the high-tech devices like an iPad or a wheelchair-mounted device through something like Tobii Dynavox. The benefits of AAC are that it can help support communication and interaction with family, friends, and professionals. It keeps that communication going. Those that specialize in cognition and neurodegenerative aspects of the condition know that it is important to keep that communication going to maintain as much of that aspect as possible. So it's really important for us to keep communication, find ways to communicate. And then we also are able to, of course, promote well-being, maintain autonomy and control over the decision-making, because without the means of communication, those decisions, it's almost impossible for them to communicate. And then also access to electronic communication, such as social networking and email. With the evolution of this technology, these devices, whether it is a iPad or any other Surface tablet, any of those kind of technologies, they are mostly at this point used in conjunction with the software for the communication of the AAC. So what you might have is that AAC program is built into the tablet, allowing them to communicate, to do emails, to use whatever means of communication is through that AAC device to then create emails, to post to social media, to check on emails, and all those kind of things that anyone would do online. Sometimes some of them even have the ability to just browse online. And this really can help with a lot of aspects of that social, but it can also help with employment if someone's really interested in trying to maintain employment as the communication abilities are decreased. So voice banking specifically, what we came here for. So I say it's a way to try to save your true and authentic voice with the help of voice banking. We'll see through this demonstration that whether it's true when I say a true and authentic voice, I think it's probably as close as we can get right now. And I do think the technology is evolving so much that essentially the synthesized voice that is created with this technology is very similar, if not very close, and maybe to some people unidentifiable as something different or generated. And now I'll get into what I'm talking about with that. So voice banking, we know that many people lose their voice or speech altogether as a result of various medical conditions. So this idea of voice banking is not just for Parkinson's. ALS community and other neurodegenerative disorders utilize this technology, but it's something that is growing within the Parkinson's community. Voice banking is a process for creating this personalized synthetic voice that we'll call the PSV. It's essentially a synthetic approximation of the person's natural voice that is created based off of a long list of phrases that are recorded that essentially incorporate all sounds that would need to be used then to manipulate and create just about any word, phrase, or sentence that you could imagine within their given language. So to create the PSV, the list of phrases that are used, and I did look up some of these lists, and the big thing about it is that they don't need to be the same for everyone, or almost shouldn't be the same for everyone. Yes, some of these programs utilize the same phrases for everyone, but they also have the option to create unique phrases and also to sample different things outside of those the textbook answers that they want them to repeat within the software. This can allow them to create as many options of words and phrases as possible in a voice that is going to replicate or be very close to theirs. I say replicate again because it does go through audio engineering technology that is going to edit and change and then combine those different sounds together for the various words, phrases, and sentences. The technology in this area is progressing rapidly though, so that's why I say that it's not something that is necessarily too far off from the your own voice, but anything that's replicated through a software is always going to have that added aspect of being a little bit different than your own true voice. What is really helpful too with this technology is that you can sample it and show it to the patient. SLPs are able to utilize this technology, and most of these companies actually allow SLPs or other clinicians to use the technology for sampling purposes by recording their own voice, creating an AAC profile, putting it into their device so that they can demonstrate it to a patient, which also is really good for setting up expectations so that they know that it might not be exactly the same, but it's a really good representation of their voice. And two clarifications that I think are good to make here is that we have two terms, message banking and voice banking. Voice banking, which is the one that I've been using the most, is the process of recording large inventory of the speech that's then used to create a synthetic voice that approximates the natural voice. Message banking, though, is a process of directly recording individual words, phrases, or sentences, or personally meaningful sounds into a program. What I mean by this is that it's actually recording, and they plan to reuse these within the AAC device. So you have voice banking, which creates this synthetic voice that you could select literally letter by letter and spell out any word or phrase you want. But these messages that are banked are more things like "I love you" in your own voice, or routine daily commands that you give to people, to pets, laughter, gestural sounds. It allows to add that extra element of that personal touch to it, and allows them to maintain as much of their voice as possible. Both these can be used together. So messages that are banked and the PSV can be used together in an AAC device. And at this point, almost all of them allow that. You can see below an example of three AAC devices. Traditionally, we had, as the most high tech would be the iPad example or a tablet device, but now most of these applications are available on things like a smartwatch, used really anywhere. They also have devices like specific ones that are not based at they're their own devices that can be attached to wheelchairs and things. But at this point, a lot of people are preferring the tablet-based preference because it allows them that ability to connect with the other with internet and those other social aspects of communication. And I haven't really checked chats. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything important here. I can't see both my screens. Okay. Holler if I'm missing if you really want to know something right now. Okay, so what are our options and how do we plan for this? So we know that there's a progressive nature to Parkinson's, especially when we're considering the voice. The voice can be impacted differently. I talked about the generally accepted symptoms that you'll hear, but that's not always the case for everyone. The presentation can vary between time, and how it presents can vary so drastically that it's important to provide the options as early on in the diagnosis as possible. So, as soon as someone receives a diagnosis of Parkinson's, or even in some situations, if we feel like we're headed that direction, but we're waiting for a neurologist or whoever to make that final decision, sometimes we can even get them into some early preventative kind of therapy that at least provides some education about their options if that is the road they're heading down. So essentially, educating and providing the support is really important for SLPs at this point. You do not need to be an expert in AC. I said I'm a voice swallowing and upper airway expert. Voice and swallowing are so heavily affected or impacted, involved, whatever you want to say, with Parkinson's that it falls a lot to the voice pathology clinicians within the SLP domain to typically work with this population, but it's not going to be exclusively. So that's why I think it's important that all SLPs have an understanding of AAC. I've tried to round off my education with around AAC, though I don't claim it as one of my specialty areas. Um, you really don't need to be a techie person. You don't need an IT degree. You don't need to be someone that is working with computers constantly. You just need to understand, and the patient needs to understand the basics of how a computer works, how to log in to a website, and how to connect a microphone and follow the prompts, really. They're best carried out before there's significant change to speech quality. That's why I say educating first is really important. If we can educate this population on their options, then they at least know that there is a possibility of saving and banking their voice for use later if they want to use it or if they need to use it. That is not always the case. They don't always get to that point. But if they don't consider it early on before the deteriorating effects of the disorder on the voice are too present, then it might be sometimes too late to utilize it. Um, Patients should be truly provided with enough information as early as possible to make their own decision. And I like it this way because it's not that the therapist is trying to influence or convince them to do this, because it is not always the right choice. For example, you have to have a certain level of cognition in place to do it because it is task-based, just like a lot of these therapies that we do. We need enough cognition present so that we are not asking them to do something that is impossible at that certain level. What I say is that early referrals for this type of situation is really important, just to give those ideas and options, even if it is just presenting, here are therapy techniques and here are some AAC techniques. It's also important to confirm at this stage what type of AAC device the person might be interested in, because it's almost a waste to talk about high-tech AAC if the person has never touched a device in their life and there's no chance of them using them. But I always try to give at least the option so that the patient always knows what is out there for them. And again, I mentioned in the last page, with the expectations, it's important to always set realistic expectations within any clinical practice. But within the work that we do, we don't want to convince someone that this is going to give them a perfect representation of their voice that is going to sound to them exactly the same. Because our voice always sounds different to ourselves when we listen to it through any device. And then when we have things like when we're using the PSV, we want them to know that the voice might differ a little bit, that it's going to feel not as the inflection and intonation is not always going to be exactly the same to the way that they would speak. So if we can download and do our own sampling as an SLP, and like I said, companies allow us to do this for free, it's really, really beneficial to have that to show a patient that, yeah, my voice sounds like this right now. Here it is in the AAC option, and allow them to hear the difference and see what they think. If it's extreme enough that they aren't interested, or if it's something that does interest them. And I always do go back to that the technology is evolving so much that I do think it's getting closer and closer to being lifelike as possible. There's many companies out there. I'm not going to focus on them because I'm not endorsing any of them specifically. There are ones that, like the acapella group, I have a short video that I'm going to show you that shows how the software works essentially with that patient population. And this software can be used with ALS, Parkinson's, or any other medical condition where they are losing that ability to speak. So the acapella group is owned by Toby Dynavox, which has been around for AAC for a long time. And also things like Apple have a personal voice aspect to their systems that you can reach out. And if you have a diagnosis of voice loss, they can actually help you create a synthetic voice that sounds like your voice by recording, again, sets of phrases and then creating that synthetic representation of your voice. Modal Talker, Speak Unique is one that is used a lot in the UK, especially with the ALS population over there. And the Voice Keeper is another one similar. Some of these are coming out very quickly as options. I haven't utilized all of them myself, but these are some options that are out there that I've heard people use. Okay, so quick little video, and we'll see if the sound comes through in this one. This one was put together by Boston Children's Hospital, and it's talking about specifically the acapella program, but all of them are essentially that same format.
Step 1. Get ready to record. Here's what you'll need to record: a computer with internet connection, a headset microphone, and a quiet space. Make sure all phones are silenced and TVs are off before you begin. You'll also need your acapella login information. If you haven't registered yet, stop here and watch our video on how to record.
So you see simple requirements. What we need is a headset microphone, which is something that individuals can easily get at this point. They need to have a quiet place to record, a computer set up, but that's really about it, other than the account that they'll have to sign up with.
For an acapella account.
I'm going to skip around a little in this one so that I'm not just playing the video. They do go through and show how to get on the website. Like any other login, the login is provided to you once everything is approved and has gone through and the funding has been allocated for this type of intervention. And then they'll give you the login information, as simple as putting it in, agreeing to the terms. But let's take a look here, and here's a demonstration of how that technology works.
Step 3. Set up the headset microphone. Connect the headset microphone to the USB port on your computer. A message might pop up asking if you want to give Chrome permission to use your microphone. Click Allow. Put the headset comfortably on your head and adjust the microphone so it's just an inch or two below your lips. Step 4. Set up the MOV recorder. From the Acapella website, select
Essentially what you do here is you're just going to log back in one more time and make sure you selected the correct
click
microphone,
the
whichever one
drop-down
you put in.
menu to
And then you're going to make some options about whether you want to have an auto mode or not. It does allow within this system and most systems those custom messages. So you can add in custom messages in addition to those prompts that they're going to give you anyways. The prompts are really short phrases. Some of them seem silly because they're not meant to be used as recorded. They're going to be used as samples for the speech sounds that you're creating.
a pop-up will appear asking if you want to record custom messages. Check No for now. We will return to this option after you finish recording the default 50 sentences. The last step is to calibrate the microphone. When you are ready, click the Record Microphone button. After the beep, count 1, 2, 3, 4, then wait silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. You should see a message that the calibration was successful. If you don't, please see our video on troubleshooting.
So you'll notice with that, the calibration is an important step because we want these samples to be within a certain threshold so that they can actually be utilized. Some people, and especially when this technology was newer, were utilizing things like Audacity, a free audio engineering software that's out there. This is perfectly fine in theory because you can set it up and make sure that you're within these thresholds. But these types of software, this type of software is able to take away that question of whether you're going to correctly set up everything on Audacity, and then all those recordings that you still have to find a company that's able to put them into a generated format.
Step 5, record. Let's review what the screen will look like as you record. At the top, you will see the sentence you need to speak highlighted. On the right, you will see your progress in the recording process. The forward and back buttons will allow you to select different sentences to record or re-record if you make a mistake. Step 1, get ready.
All right, so really straightforward. The technology is not difficult. I don't think it's something that would take much to teach anyone to use. Here's a quick video that I thought was really nice from Parkinson's UK, talking about technology, AAC, and how that development really is beneficial to the Parkinson's population and how utilizing it really can help maintain autonomy and your ability to communicate and do everything in your daily life.
Living day to day with Parkinson's can be really difficult, mainly because of the huge breadth of symptoms we face and how we all experience a different set of them. That's why I'm rooting for technology. There's a whole host of devices and apps out there that we can piece together to make our own personalised toolkit.
I have no doubt that smartphone apps, wearable technology will become part of an overall strategy to help us manage our Parkinson's and lead a much more enjoyable and fulfilling life.
There's a lot that is really very easy to do, and enjoy all that technology can bring you. It will only get better.
Devices and apps can help us to communicate.
I sometimes struggle with the fact that I'm very slow. And it's not to lose the ability with my hands to type.
I've written a book, all dictated straight into the computer, and as I get less able, it gets more so.
Video calls can be quite good because you don't have to pay anything. You can speak face to face.
That was what he said about the big thing for me was that as progression happens, as those abilities start to deteriorate away, it's important to know that there are options out there that can help and assist within those times so that it doesn't feel as if you are losing any of those abilities, because the assistive aids can really take over and manage some of that responsibility. Okay, so a little bit of real life patient experiences with voice banking. So I pulled some experiences that I was able to find and a couple from people I know. First is a woman named Mary. She has Parkinson's. She is using voice banking to keep her own voice ready for if she needs it, but she can still be herself no matter what. What I love about this story here is that Mary is not doing this because she knows that she's going to need it. She's doing it so that she has it as an option. She says, it was during my sessions with my speech therapist that I first heard about voice banking, which really got me thinking. And important, it doesn't need to be a speech therapist, obviously, to present this idea. It can be anyone that is working clinically with them within rehabilitation, whether it's physical therapist, OT, or if it's any other physician that wants to make this recommendation. It's great to explore with an SLP just because we have a little bit of background in it. She says, I'm hopeful that with continued practice, my voice will always be understandable and I will still be a loudmouth. Fun, she's keeping it fun. The thing about this is that it does not take the place of things like LSVT. It's still good to maintain those exercise regimens and to still do all of your other voice strengthening exercises as long as you're able to. It doesn't replace that. It just gives an option so that if it gets to the point that you need it, you have it. After setting up a login, she says that each sentence was presented before you press record and read it aloud, which we just saw. There's an option to record personal sentences, including places and names. When it's ready to be built, they send you a sample to review. They bank your voice and update it as technology advances. And she says, hopefully, my voice bank will never be used. But even if it's only for a short time, I know I won't be putting strain on my family trying to understand me. And it's sweet that her concern is her family. Oftentimes people are thinking about those around them within those aspects and the difficulty, but it's really helpful to everyone in that situation there that she'll be able to maintain communication and still make some choices for her and communicate her needs and wants. Next one is Phil's story. He was also diagnosed with Parkinson's about 8 years ago and now has trouble speaking loudly and clearly enough, which is what we often see. He and his wife, Kate, have decided to use voice banking software to help Phil communicate. Important in this story, it's really the support of Kate that I think gets Phil to embrace this idea. The voice is quiet, he says, and he has dystonia in his jaw, so his pronunciation is distorted. Speaking is a huge effort, and sometimes I feel embarrassed when people don't understand me, he says. So Kate and Phil explored this idea of voice banking, and they used a company called Speak Unique, which recorded Phil's voice. This is the one that I said is utilized a lot in the UK, but it can be utilized anywhere. The company is all around the world. And a version of Phil's voice that is created that will allow him to speak clearly and loudly, even as his voice maybe deteriorates further. It doesn't just repeat the same phrases, she explained, and as we saw, it creates a synthetic voice. The recordings are done using an external microphone, which plugs into your home computer. So as long as you have an external microphone, headset is best, and you're able to record your voice through the computer, you're able to take advantage of this technology. Here's another quick one here. This is an individual named David, and he is not Parkinson's, but he has ALS, and he is using the same technology, though, as a means to bank his voice.
There are 1,000 or so phrases that need to be recorded. I think probably if I was very efficient, I could turn that around in a week. But there are mornings I wake up and I'm just not in that frame of mind that I want to do this. He couldn't even find a place. I was aware that MND can affect the voice, so I knew that that was an area that I might possibly have complications with later on. I hadn't been aware that there was the service of recording your voice. So being told about that, it was good news, really. I think it's a great way to be able to retain that part of your identity.
And maintaining the core of your identity, especially within communication, is really a tenet of AAC, and it's a really important one that allows voice banking to be something that many people can benefit, even though it's a motor neuron disorder patient and not a Parkinson's patient. This is Craig. Craig is going to give you a little sample of what his voice sounds like through his device. You'll also see that this is an example where he is using I believe it's an iPad or some other type of tablet device, but that has been mounted to his wheelchair. You also see that it looks like they put in a couple head switches here for him, probably to communicate specific needs that he can use the side of his head for. As mobility is reduced, AAC can find ways and options for people so that they can still use whatever functioning part of their body is going to work to communicate. This often leads to eye gaze being the last option, where the eyes and the technology follows the eyes to essentially where the eyes are looking at on the device to communicate, but it's essentially letter by letter typically at that point. And I do have one more after this that will show that briefly, but let's see, Craig's going to give us a little message.
for 2 years, we decided to bank my voice with model talking because I wanted to go one better than Stephen Hawking.
Voice banking is a process.
Great sense of humor there, clearly, and you can see how the device is mounted to his chair here. So you usually have a bar that goes across the front there, so you attach it, and sometimes other devices too if you want to add anything else to the whole setup. What you'll see here is another motor neuron disorder patient from the United Kingdom. The National Health Service there has done a lot to really support this program of voice banking, and they've kind of set themselves apart from the system that we have here. I think it'd be wonderful if we followed the same model where individuals explore this option almost across the board, whether or not they necessarily need it in the end, they're at least given the option of having this technology. You probably saw from the voicing too, and being United Kingdom, it had a little bit of an accent there, but the technology sounds very lifelike. There's not too much of a robotic-like quality to it that you typically get from the voice-generated devices. If you think of a GPS that you use or anything, it's that same type of technology that's put into these devices if you don't do voice banking.
Whereby.
Okay. 3 more quick ones here. Kate recommends voice banking to anyone with Parkinson's struggling with their speech. She told me that we're keen that people know that if their voice is getting quicker, they should look into voice banking rather than later. And Sue says you will never know when your voice will be affected. And after being diagnosed in December 2021, she used the Speak Unique voice repair service, and this allowed her to maintain her voice in the face of her diagnosis. And Jacqueline talks about her mother, saying that it's reassuring to know that her mom's voice is banked and ready to use if and when she needs it, because it's really about having the options. Okay, and we're going to finish up with Steve. Steve is an individual that has an ALS diagnosis. They actually did a full-length documentary on him and voice banking through Amazon Studios. All of these videos I do have cited at the end of the presentation, so you know if you want to go and see the full context of any of them. But here it just gives a little view of it, and it also shows how when someone embraces and utilizes a technology like this, it really gives them the options in the end to do what they at least want.
It transpires that my ova has evidentiary, not literary merit. Damn it.
You lose your voice when you have ALS, and so he researched this place where you can actually voice bank. So his mechanical voice, instead of being like Stephen Hawking, his is going to be his voice.
Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin also took himself out of the running.
Then it goes to eye technology where he talks with his eyes, but he's talking a letter at a time.
Hi, Miss Young, you rock.
Okay, a couple things from there. You see at the beginning that the phrase that's used, it's not even always a logical phrase, but it's often trying to get speech sounds. It's to get a lot of samples of the different speech sounds. You also probably noticed in this recording that he wasn't pleased with it, so he had another chance to go back and do it again. By exploring this, it gave him the option to create this voice-generated device so that once he got to the point of eye gaze, which is the technology that I mentioned earlier, the eye gaze technology requires that you either just use a standard, whatever voice comes with the package that you've purchased, or if you've done voice banking, it can be your synthesized replicated voice. The eye gaze technology specifically is typically the last option that we use as a trained AAC. And you'll see this is another Tobii Dynavox device. A lot of the eye gaze ones that are used typically are because it's a high level technology. And what it does is it actually tracks the movement of the eyes. And you'll see here, what the technology is seeing is that his eye at this moment is looking at the letter G. Let's see. Oh, it moved because his eyes moved. So then it went to O. And you see that as he sits on any of those letters, it has a certain confirmation period time. So this can be changed. Different individuals want longer, shorter, depending on their preferences and how quickly they become comfortable with using this technology. But he's going through letter by letter, spelling out, and he's saying, and how touching that he's, with his voice, still able to speak to his wife through this, even once he got to the point where the eye gaze technology was needed. But it's really amazing the things that are out there. One last thing I think I'll say before we move on to any questions and any comments that anyone has for me. This technology, when utilized early, you can, I will say it this way, you can take your time in the sense that you're not going to be rushed through the program. You can do it quickly if you want. I read different stats that some of the companies try to claim 2 to 4 hours to record all the phrases. I think that's pretty quick, and those are for the ones that have less phrases typically. But the ones that are closer to like 1,200 to 1,600 phrases that you have to record, realistically, at the quickest, maybe I saw some stats that said like maybe around 12 hours if you did it from start to end. Realistically, it's something that you want to find times when the voice is working well. Most people that have a Parkinson's diagnosis are aware that their voice is better at one time of day during the other. Typically in the morning, it's stronger. We want them to do these recordings when they're comfortable and to not overexhaust themselves, and to make sure that the results that they're getting are going to be beneficial for them in the end, because the whole reason of doing it is to keep that voice and to bank it. Okay, I did a lot of talking and I did not check my chat, or wasn't able to because I haven't used Zoom in a while. But let me see if I've got any questions for you guys. If anyone wants to raise their hand or anything, speak up, please do.
You have one question that just came in.
Yes, cost for the process. It varies drastically between. Most insurers will consider, I'll say how I want to say this. Insurers will consider, depending on the diagnosis and the situation, whether they will cover these costs. Certain populations and disorders or diseases, typically, some of them have better chances than others. There are even free programs out there that I've heard of, but I have not heard of anyone using the free programs in for an intensive primary communication means. But it doesn't mean that it isn't an option. But they are expensive, and they vary kind of drastically across the board.
I was also wondering, I apologize for coming in late. But this is really amazing. I read the information on the registration page. I'm wondering if you are able to bring this awareness into high schools, especially, I mean, all of the high schools have they have a lot of incredible technology programs. Trying to recall the Alderdice in Squirrel Hill has an incredible technology program. So I was wondering if you are taking this into the high schools because of awareness, and just even how capable our teens are. They would be able to run different sectors themselves. And then we have our own speech therapists, or speech pathologists, so incorporating both the technology and their skills. This is really absolutely incredible. I love hearing about this, but yeah.
Right. Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think anything to educate, and because it's one of those things that if we don't get the word out and get people to realize that this is an option that they have, and it's something that can be used in conjunction with all their other traditional therapy techniques, it just gives them an added aspect. It would be perfect, I agree, school-based, especially if we're trying to get community engagement with the younger folks in high schools. They know the technology. It wouldn't take anything to train them, because truly they're all made to be intuitive. It's follow the prompts, and that those high school kids are going to know how to get a microphone connected, right? That's a wonderful idea, and that's a great initiative that I do think that would be, I like that. I will see what I can do with that. Like I said, AAC is not the biggest part of what I do, but I try to incorporate it because it's so valuable. There is always someone, and even if it's I've even used it with patients that simply were screaming at a concert and lost their voice. They still need a means to communicate in that means time. So I would find something for them to communicate with, and it was always some sort of AAC device, whether it was low tech or high tech. It is an option that is beneficial to so many areas, and educating the community in a general sense, I do think is a wonderful idea.
I think it would really open career ideas.
Yes, absolutely. It's anything involved, and especially the SLP domain is one where they're constantly saying we don't have enough people going into it to meet the needs of all the patients and all the clients out there that need these services. So it would be a perfect way of getting them engaged with that population.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Great idea. I love that. Okay, any other questions?
Do you have a
concerns.
question, Chrissy?
Oh, Chrissy.
You can just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Go for it.
Or you can
Technology.
type it in the chat, Chrissy. Matthew, while we're waiting, and you may have touched on this, but when would you say this initially came out as something?
The technology itself, it's been honestly the oldest that I was able to find reference to it being widely used was in the UK about, I think it was 15, maybe 20 years ago-ish. So it's been around a little bit, but has been used by other populations a lot more. So I have plenty of stories and individuals with Parkinson's that have utilized this, but it is a technology that really can be used in so many areas that a lot of the study and a lot of the because in the United Kingdom, they actually have through the National Health Service a whole program that they've created that allows for this process to happen. And it's kind of all included there, you know, how the process works. Here's the added steps and everything, but it is still an option for all of those populations. And it is one that ALS you saw with Steve Gleason, that it's something that he was able to utilize. Many people could use this and really benefit. And I think that the uses will kind of keep expanding, honestly, as we go along. It doesn't seem to have an end point in my mind, which
Well,
is kind of AAC in general is meant to be that way. Find a way to meet the needs of individuals and see what we can do to help.
Okay, I think I fixed my technology possibly. Am I speaking? Okay.
Yes, you are.
A question. So my husband has Parkinson's and he got the deep brain stimulator and his speech deteriorated a lot after that also. So we finally did get one of these devices and we're on the trial period. The Center for Assistive Technology is where we got it from. And while we were there, the lady was great and we had a really long meeting and our son went with us, who was a teenager. My husband's speech is too far gone to do voice banking, but our son, she said, his voice could be used. Now, whenever we got the actual device, it sounds really like a robot. I know it's just a loaner until you get approved after the 30-day trial, but once that we got that device, then the same lady told us it's thousands of dollars to use our son's voice. Is that correct? Or is there any way for it not to be thousands of dollars and for the device, which is kind of like a bummer for my husband now, to not sound like a robot instead of like a human?
Yes, I'm glad you bring that up because it is one of the hindrances to most AAC in general is the cost aspect of it, even when we can get things covered or loaned or anything like that, because in different settings, there's lots of loaning programs for AC devices, especially like in the school, as what like most states have, where you could request one for a student pretty easily. But it's going to be typically it's high tech, but it's not.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry. For some reason, it says my video stopped and I'm not hearing any of this important information.
I think there may have been a little freezing.
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear any of the important information. I'm sorry.
We'll just wait a moment and Matthew should be right back on. Or he's probably going to come right back on.
Okay.
Boy, wouldn't it be interesting if this was put on an app and then that way the cost coverage would be a lot less.
Mhm.
That would be ideal.
It's just exciting that they told us that he could sound like a human and he was excited to use it, especially with it being our son's voice, which is close to what his was. And then whenever that we actually get the device, they're like, no, you have to still sound like a robot because it's thousands of dollars to do that.
For the
Gosh.
I didn't know if there was any way like for that to be covered or less or anything, or if that's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
Right, that's a very good question. Oh, okay, he's back. Now you're
Okay.
muted, Matthew.
Oh, did he freeze again?
Oh no.
Oh,
There you are.
Am I back? I don't know.
Yay.
Technology had enough with me, I guess. Sorry about that, Christy and everyone.
It's okay.
Honestly, Christy, the big thing that you bring up is what is the struggle in the United States in particular, not to get into the insurance health stuff or the situation that we're in. What I would recommend to you primarily is to try to gain as much of a referral for that from speech, OT, PT, anyone that he sees can make input on that. And if you have the input to the ensure that this is a device that is necessary, that the only way to maintain communication, the only way that he will be able to keep his voice or as close to his voice as possible, that is typically the way that we can try to convince insurance. But I won't lie, it is typically like that where, and I've had cases like that where it's me or my supervisor that have to call and try to convince them that they need this service. And sometimes it even comes down to just the voice therapy itself. It's advocating the fact that you are there for him. I would say keep advocating. It doesn't probably make it easier for you to hear that, but advocate as much as you can. The more pressure you can put on them to realize that this is what needs to be. And just like any other treatment, it should be covered. Typically you can get them to that point, but it does take pushing. I'm honest about that. And it is expensive.
Okay.
Typically most of the programs are at least a couple thousand.
Yes.
But the programs, most of them have in place, and they don't always advertise it, but usually also have in place hardship. I don't know what word I want to use to that, but like how hospitals have some sort of
Okay.
hardship program and agreement. Sometimes they can come to agreement for you that might be less than what they're advertising. So I would really suggest talking to them as much as possible, telling them the situation. If you want to, and I do have my contact stuff at the end of the presentation here, if you want to reach out to me through there or anything, I can try to see if I can get any specific people or anything to get you a hold of. Absolutely. The big thing with it is keep advocating, and it's not always easy, but that's especially with this type of stuff. It takes that person to advocate, takes the speech therapist, takes whatever physician, clinician, whoever that you're seeing that is aware of the situation and the limitations, and they can put that on paper. It really typically will help, at least to make your case.
Okay, we've been doing this for years. With our son had cancer before. He's totally fine now. But then Josh, my husband's only 45, and so he doesn't want to sound like a robot, but he wants to communicate, and this is a great way for him to communicate. And whenever they said, "Oh, your son could do it," then we're like, "Great, that sounds similar to his voice." But then they said, "Oh, it's thousands of dollars." Well, him being that young and needing this much care, having Parkinson's, we're not millionaires, and so it's not going to be great. Like he's going to be sounding like a robot, and then he doesn't want to use it because he sounds like a robot. So maybe, I guess that's the route I have to do, is just like beg them to
Absolutely.
say
And that's
that's why.
honestly what I would expect of most.
Okay.
Yes, if you can get as much backing and support from the clinicians and physicians, it makes it a lot harder for the insurers. And I'll tell you, there are peer-to-peers that they'll have us do that. Often, if an insurer does not want to pay for something, they will pull us into a video session like this where we argue our case, and there will be another whatever field expert it is that'll be there as well. And if you can justify to them, and if you can get your clinicians to justify it, then we can, typically it'll be covered, especially with like an early onset Parkinson's diagnosis, because they know that that is going to severely impact them, and that this is one of the main options. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for your situation, but keep hanging in there and keep being an advocate. It sounds like you're wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
She is. I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Casey.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, yeah. Can you explain more about 11 Labs and like their pricing scheme and how their recordings interface with devices or not?
Which the 11 Labs, that is one of the newer ones. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about that one specifically because it is one of the newer ones. The Vocal ID and the 11 Labs, I know the least about. I've heard people talk about exploring them. I believe that they both have, if I'm correct, I'll look into this to make sure that I'm not telling you anything wrong, but I'm pretty sure they both offer like a sampling, like you can try it out. Most of these companies will at least do that or say that they'll do that, and then we'll create, and then you can approve. And then, of course, then before the final product gets to you, they're going to expect whatever compensation through whatever funding source. The 11 Labs is one. What I remember is that they did make claims that the AI aspect is more supposedly heightened in it. I don't know enough, and I'm not a tech person enough to know what that AI stuff is that they're talking about specifically. But the idea behind it is that they're trying to make an easier process, or one that is streamlined and utilizing the new technology. And that's what I think we'll see happening. I think more and more of these companies will pop up. I think that more options will, which I think will be good for pricing, good for availability, good for everything for the patient, as long as we keep publicizing and showing people that these are options out there for them. The most established, the ones I'll say that I know the most about, the Acapella group has been around for a while and was acquired by Tobii Dynavox. I don't have far from any affiliation with Tobii Dynavox, but they are one of the oldest and have really been around. So many people think of them as kind of like gold standard or like the go-to. But there are other options at this point, and typically they are usually one of the most expensive because they are seen as kind of the best in the field, you know. But those other options, I think, are probably becoming a lot closer to primarily yeah. Sorry, I don't have a specific price on those ones, but that one, yeah, I did less into that aspect of the background and research, mostly because I didn't want to advertise for any specific one, if I'm being honest.
Thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
Any last questions from the group? Okay, well, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Matthew. It was very interesting to learn about this technology. And
thank you. Thank you for everyone that came and listened.
Thank you.
Please
appreciate
share
your
with
time.
everyone. Oh, of course, I'm glad to do it. I know, and this is a Parkinson's population is one that I think it's close to my heart, and it's one that I am happy to and glad to try to support.
Okay, well, we'll see if Matthew can come on for the final goodbye. If not, we'll just wait another moment. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Very interesting topic, and I know that we'll be hearing more about it. And thank you to Matthew again. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.